Coming up on American Medicine Today, Richard Gallagher is a psychiatrist that spent 25 years investigating possessions, diabolical attacks, and the paranormal. He joins us to discuss what it's like experiencing some of the strangest cases detailed in his new book, Demonic Foes. Then Deborah was suffering from lower lumbar pain that made it nearly impossible to walk. After undergoing a fusion surgery that gave her zero relief, she came to the Bonati Spine Institute and is now able to walk pain-free. Finally, rare diseases normally don't receive the same research and treatment as their more common counterparts. However, a recent shift is being made towards a more patient-centered biotechnology. James Geraghty joins us to discuss what's inside the orphan drug revolution. Will this approach finally give rare diseases the attention they deserve? Find out coming up on American Medicine Today.
Featuring cutting-edge science and medical innovation, touching personal stories of recovery from pain, along with political, social, and healthcare issues plaguing our nation. This is American Medicine Today, brought to you by the Bonati Spine Institute and Alfred Bonati, MD.
Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonati alongside Ethan Youker. So a thought-provoking and, might I add, eerie new book in stores now is sure to attract both skeptics and believers alike. Joining us to discuss this fascinating topic is Dr. Richard Gallagher, author of Demonic Foes, My 25 Years as a Psychiatrist Investigating Possessions, Diabolic Attacks, and the Paranormal. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Gallagher.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I realize it's kind of a far-out subject for most, but how did a successful New York psychiatrist become involved in demonic possession?
Well, the short answer, Kimberly, is I never volunteer.
You were chosen.
Well, somebody asked me, there was a kind of rumpled but very pleasant priest who turned out to be one of America's few exorcists, at least Catholic exorcists, about 25 years ago. And he walked into my office at Cornell Medical College and said, Dr. Gallagher, I'd like you to investigate a case that I think is demonic. I'm a little skeptical of that stuff. And I remember what he said to me with a smirk. He said, well, then you're the perfect man for the job. In other words, he wanted someone sort of skeptical, but a believer. I mean, he knew I was a Catholic. The rest is really history. I've been asked to write articles and see patients. Again, these are not patients of mine, but let's say people who are affected by demonic attacks, at least suspected. And then I was asked to join the Vatican-approved International Association of Exorcists as a scientific advisor. I was later asked to write a book by HarperCollins. And believe it or not, Hollywood, specifically Jason Blum, wants to make a movie out of all this. So everything I've done, I've been asked to do.
We already said how you got involved, but that first woman, you said she exhibited behavior that defied logic. Tell us about that.
Well, in her case, she was not possessed. She was undergoing what the priest thought was an oppression, which is kind of a attenuated demonic attack. Specifically, she and her husband and actually people who knew her claimed that she would be sitting around or lying in bed, and all of a sudden these bruises would appear all over her body. And she thought it was caused by invisible evil spirits. I kept an open mind. We did some medical tests. I checked her platelets and things like that. And I came to the conclusion that there was no medical or psychiatric reason why this was going on. Which is really my job. Again, I'm not an exorcist. These are not even patients of mine. I'm just doing discernments or evaluations.
And so were you present at that exorcism and then subsequent cases?
Well, she more had, again, she was oppressed. So she more had what they call deliverance prayers and also followed spiritual advice. The two things go in tandem. I have been to many exorcisms in my life as an observer. Again, I don't necessarily take an active role in that. I do sometimes like to see what happens with these cases. It's much more typical of a possession, which is this more severe attack, where somebody will be authorized to have a exorcism. And the church is very careful about it. I mean, I think a lot of churches and a lot of religions, these possessions happen in all cultures, by the way. And they should be subject to a very rigorous evaluation, often by a doctor. Sometimes that's required.
Are exorcisms really something that happen quite frequently?
No. First of all, possessions are rare. And therefore, exorcisms, at least as authorized by the more mainstream Orthodox churches like the Catholic Church, they're pretty rare events. However, if you look through history, you realize that, and this is basically, it's a scientific subject, but it's a historical subject. It depends on historical data. Plenty of cases written up in history. There was a German professor about 100 years ago who was an agnostic guy, and he surveyed possessions in all different cultures throughout history. So sometimes people say to me, well, as a psychiatrist, aren't you a little out of the mainstream? And I say to them, well, what mainstream are you talking about? Most Americans believe in evil spirits.
Yes.
Most people around the world believe in evil spirits, and people throughout history have. So I don't really see that I'm quite out of the mainstream.
Except most of us think of possession or any sort of interference with demonic spirits and things like that is straight out of a movie, straight out of Blumhouse, like you just said, that they're making a movie out of your story. So I want to know some of these things that you've seen personally up close. I mean, in my notes, it talks about, in the notes to your book, a professional woman who claimed her mother had sent a spirit after her. Another case of a 90-pound woman who threw a man twice her size across the room. And then there's a woman called Julia, who you called a once-in-a-lifetime possession. Tell us about some of these, because obviously we don't have all day, even though I'd like to talk to you all day.
Well, the most flamboyant case was Julia, and she was literally a devil-worshipping Satanist. Now, these people are rare, too. I mean, I was trained during an era, we had a satanic panic during that period, too. Mm-hmm. So this was a rare woman. Now, she exhibited all types of paranormal abilities, even outside of her trances. In her exorcisms, I did not attend those, but I've attended many exorcisms where the person does exhibit enormous strength, like that woman who threw the 200-pound deacon across the room, and also speak foreign languages. During Julia's exorcism, she spoke a number of foreign languages. She also had what we call hidden knowledge. She could tell me all kinds of things, like how my mother had died 20 years earlier. And the 8 or 9 people who went through, who witnessed her exorcism, sort of salt of the earth people, they all swore to me that she levitated off the chair where she was being held down for about a half an hour. In fact, I've heard from about 35 people during the course of my career of levitations. So these obviously go beyond the psychiatric. I tell my colleagues, look, how many psychiatric patients do you know who all of a sudden start speaking perfect Latin or levitate?
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to have that clear appearance of these demonic phenomena.
What are your personal thoughts? Do you really think that people get possessed by evil spirits? I guess is the bottom line question.
Yes, although I think it's rare, and I think a lot of people are confused and only think they are. For instance, psychiatrists often see people who claim that they're hearing voices of evil spirits. Other people maybe are very evil. It doesn't mean they're possessed. Other people are very suggestible or maybe have a multiple personality or something. That's the role of a doctor like myself, to rule out all that stuff and to be left with the cases that have so much paranormal phenomena involved and have a history suggestive of somebody who's turned to something dark and inadvertently invited a spirit in. But my conclusion is absolutely these rare cases, people can be possessed by evil spirits.
To me, it's totally eerie and creepy. I know the only spirit I want to be with me is Jesus Christ, and I pray to God that I never encounter anything like this. Thank you so much for shedding light on it. Dr. Richard Gallagher, author of Demonic Foes, My 25 Years as a Psychiatrist Investigating Possessions, Diabolic Attacks, and the Paranormal. Thank you for speaking out about this.
You're welcome.
Make sure you stay tuned. Coming up after the break, a story of recovery. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati Spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented the precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati Spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 70,000 procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Nearly half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others fail. Deborah is an active woman that enjoys spending time with her friends and family.
Well, I was working full-time, cleaned my house, did yard work, went to the movies, socialized with friends and family. Since 2014, I have been in chronic pain. I have no life. I wasn't able to enjoy the things that I used to. I don't know what brought it on. It was just, I was working, I started having pain. It was in my low back and went into my butt cheeks, the inner thigh, outer thighs. I had throbbing, burning, stabbing. From one end of the spectrum to the other, I experienced that pain. And I had developed numbness in my big left toe. It prevents me from walking, sitting, or standing for any length of time. I would walk with a walker and sometimes without a walker. It just depended on the day.
Initially, she sought help from conservative treatments.
I saw my primary care physician, and she put me on a steroid. 2 weeks later, I'm back in her office. I didn't get any relief from the steroid treatment. So then she gave me some shots. She had diagnosed me as having trochanterus bursitis, and I got multiple shots in that area with no relief. I saw 16 different specialists. I went to 3 different pain clinics, and I had multiple physical therapy. And the physical therapy actually made everything so much worse. It aggravated it. And when I would come home from physical therapy, I was in bed.
When nothing provided relief, she was diagnosed with an annular tear in June of 2020 and underwent a spinal fusion at the Mayo Clinic.
The surgery didn't give me any relief. I had the same identical symptoms that I had before I had surgery. They had me wear a pain patch for a week, and then you would change out the patch. The side effects, getting nauseating, and it wasn't helping me. I wore the patch for probably 2 months and told the doctor, this patch is not working for me. I was just like, nope, I am tired of going to all the physicians in my local area and not getting any relief whatsoever.
After fusion surgery failed to alleviate her pain, Deborah wasn't sure what else she could do. Then one day while watching TV, she learned about the Bonati Spine Institute.
And I happened to just catch Dr. Bonati on Newsmax, and I thought about it for a while, and then I started going into the Facebook page for Bonati, went on YouTube, and listened to other testimonies from other patients that have been treated here. And to be quite honest with you, I was tearing up because I thought, oh my gosh, this person has the same issues that I have, and that they were able to help that patient.
With renewed hope, Deborah contacted the Bonati Spine Institute and sent her MRIs in for review. Dr. Bonati called her personally to discuss her case and told her she would be a good candidate for his procedures.
When Dr. Bonati, said I was a candidate, I was very excited. But then because of my past experience at a spine institute, I had my doubts, And when I got here, they said they could help me.
The exclusive Bonati Spine procedures are performed incrementally using conscious IV sedation, where the patient remains awake and interactive with their surgeon. This technique is used to ensure the source of their pain is eliminated.
The surgical experience was wonderful.
One benefit of incremental surgeries is it gives the body time to heal.
I had 3 surgeries. The first surgery, I had immediately relief on my left side, and I was overjoyed. Not having any pain in my legs. So that's awesome. And they did tell me that it's not uncommon for patients to think that it's only on one side when it involves the other side as well. So that's why he decided to go into the right side and work on the L4, L5, I believe. It's going fairly well. I still have some pain on my right side, but there's more surgeries that are planned. And it would involve the L5, S1, and then possibly removing the hardware, because the hardware may be pinching nerves and, in a different area.
Any pain going down your legs or your butt? Nope. No? Nothing in the front or the side?
Nope.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Okay.
After surgery at the Bonati Spine Institute, patients are encouraged to walk a few times a day to aid their body in the healing process.
They recommended that I do therapy at home, walking about 20 minutes a day, and gradually increase as I can tolerate. And I'm to do stretches because you can develop scar tissue, and that's with any surgical procedure. So if I continue to move around, it should loosen up and I should heal quicker and not develop any more scar tissue.
Now on her way to living a pain-free life, Deborah is looking forward to spending time once again with friends and family.
Going on a walk with my husband and my dog. He walks our little dachshund every weekend, and I'll be able to start, hopefully, joining them on that walk. And he does at least 3 miles.
Deborah highly recommends the Bonati Spine Institute to anyone suffering with neck or back pain.
I am so thrilled that I've gotten relief. Come to Bonati Spine. You will be very pleased.
Actually, the recovery was great. I mean, I really immediately felt the difference. I was able to go back to work within a couple of days.
The progress after each procedure was amazingly good. The recovery all told has been phenomenal.
The recovery was pretty easy. I was able to walk around after surgery with no problem.
And when I got up off that table, it was like, like a reborn again when I was able to walk off that table and walk out and go for lunch. I went in there at 10 o'clock, got operated on. At 12 o'clock, I was walking out on my own.
We went to the Bonati Institute, and that was the day, the turning point in my life. This type of surgery is so much more advanced, and the recovery time is so much less that it's just a no-brainer. If you've got pain, go to Bonati.
This is the honest to God truth. And was recovering, I didn't feel anything. The pain that I was suffering is gone. I can go back to work in like 3 days.
The surgeries that I had, actually, I recovered very easily from, I would say. I actually went to work the following afternoon.
That afternoon, when it was done, I actually felt so much better already.
6 days after surgery, I was back in the gym, slowly but surely working my way back to fighting, back to basically 100% of fighting. So 6 days, and everybody wasn't all like, didn't you just get out of surgery? I'm like, yeah, I feel great. And they're like, okay, let's see how you do. And I was bowling with everybody, and I'm in the advanced class. So that sounds a lot right there.
First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Bonati succeeds where others fail. Welcome back to American Medicine Today. So advancements in medicine have made it possible to better treat the most common illnesses, but there's a whole catalog of rare diseases that people are much less aware of. Joining us is James Geraghty, author of Inside the Orphan Drug Revolution, The Promise of Patient-Centered Biotechnology. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you first explain kind of what orphan disease is?
An orphan disease is a rare disease. It's defined in the United States as one that afflicts fewer than 1/10 of 1% of the people.
The term orphan drug, I hadn't even heard of until fairly recently.
Yes.
And so, I mean, not only are the diseases and the treatment for these diseases pretty rare and unknown, the term itself is pretty rare and unknown. So tell us what drove you to write a book about such unknown illnesses that afflict people.
Well, that's part of why I wrote it. You know, these diseases are very well known to the patients and the families that suffer from them. And what people don't understand is there are now 7,000 rare diseases that have been identified. Individually, each one is rare, but collectively they afflict over 30 million people, almost 1/10 of the United States population.
Wow. And so what happens with that? Because if it's an orphan disease, correct me if I'm wrong, but Big Pharma doesn't really target that, correct?
Well, that was exactly the case at the beginning of the orphan drug revolution.
All right.
And that's why patients advocated for change, and that's what led to the passage of the Orphan Drug Act 40 years ago in 1983, which is part of where the book takes off from. But as a result of that, and as a result of amazing work by countless physicians, scientists, entrepreneurs, parents, family members, and the book describes the difference between a family facing a rare genetic disease 40 years ago when no one had heard of it, there were no drugs available, no one working on research, where today there's a vibrant community, many therapies have been approved, and many more are in development.
So what are some of these diseases that, you know, we want to, that's the whole point of talking to you, obviously, is to promote the book, but also to kind of shine a light on what some of these orphan diseases or orphan illnesses are.
Yeah, some of them are known to people through the efforts of often, celebrities and people and philanthropists. Jerry Lewis made the boys with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy famous 50 years ago in the United States. Lou Gehrig, of course, Lou Gehrig's disease is well known, today known as ALS. Peter Frates, the Ice Bucket Challenge. Now, they've made a few diseases famous, but the vast majority of these thousands of diseases, they have obscure names named after long dead discoverers, Gaucher disease, Fabry disease, Pompe disease, or they're called by the complex pathologies patients suffer from with names like metachromatic leukodystrophy. And, no one knows those diseases unless there are either physicians or scientists working on them or families or loved ones suffering from them.
Mm-hmm. And how can something like this be assessed? Because if you come up with the drugs, if not a lot of people suffer from them, how are we able to really know if they work?
They were often misdiagnosed. Patients were undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for many years. That still happens today with some diseases. But today with genetic testing, they can be diagnosed very accurately, and with newborn screening, which is a very important policy for people to understand. We could test for many more diseases with newborn screening than we do today. And that will allow us to pick up diseases that, if treated at birth, can be treated very effectively.
Now, I want to go back real quick. Tell us how the development of a treatment for a rare genetic disorder called Gaucher disease basically revolutionized and transformed the industry.
Yeah, it did. And, I say in the book that it's a story of miracles, and it's a story of miracles brought about by passionate people who refuse to give up and take no for an answer. And the therapy for Gaucher disease is a great example. The disease was first diagnosed in France well over 100 years ago in the 19th century. No one knew how to treat it. A dedicated physician at the U.S. National Institutes of Health, Roscoe Brady, worked on it for 30 years. He did a clinical trial. This is the story of the amazing miracles that happened. He did a trial with 7 patients. It failed in 6 of them, worked in 1. And that only one it worked in was a 3-year-old child who wasn't supposed to be in the trial, but was only in it because his mother insisted that he get in it. And it only worked in him because it turned out they had the dosing wrong, and you needed the dose that they had only worked in a small child. Based on that, they did another trial in adults with a different dose. An entrepreneur named Henry Termeer, many people consider the father of the orphan drug revolution, at a company named Genzyme, against all odds and against all advice, took that therapy on, raised the money from very skeptical investors to finance the trial. The next trial was done in 12 patients, and the trial showed almost miraculous benefit in those 12 patients, and within a few years have become the standard of care for patients with Gaucher disease in the United States and around the world, and had revolutionized their lives. That 3-year-old boy went on, whose name was Brian Berman, went on to become, as an adult, a father, and amazingly enough, the president of the National Gaucher Federation, showing how revolutionary the therapy was.
That case alone, I'm sure, inspired many scientists to dive into some of these rare diseases. Big Pharma and some of these drug companies, do you think they're not going to be profitable enough, as sad and sick as it sounds, to put greed and profits over human lives. Any disease, even if it's one person amongst 8-9 billion, they should try to be finding a cure for that. So do you think it boils down to profits and greed and money?
Not really, no. I mean, 40 years ago, the reason we needed this legislation and we needed, Congress to step in was because the pharma companies at that point had lost their way and they'd become very profit-oriented. And that's where they'd fallen to the bottom in terms of, ratings among the American public in terms of how they viewed the industry. But with the success of the biotech industry, which really was driven by passionate entrepreneurs and very dedicated founders who really did care about these patients and want to find a way to help them. Those companies have been very successful. The success of those drugs has revolutionized the industry. And now many people are working on these drugs. But the problem is today, we don't have the mechanisms in terms of reimbursement systems or regulatory systems that allow investors to get a return. So people don't make more profit in rare diseases than other sectors. But in fact, today, because investors can't see any possibility of making a return on their investment in these very rare diseases, investment is flowing out of this field, and people are struggling to keep the companies and the programs that they're developing alive.
So how do we make those type of drugs more affordable?
A couple of initiatives, and I talk about these. That's what the last section of the book talks about. We need regulatory reform to allow them to get to market faster. Approvals in the United States are often delayed 2 or 3 years or more before their approval in Europe, for example. We also need the newest wave of therapies are one-time therapies, genetic therapies that can provide a lifetime of benefit. But those therapies are reimbursed collectively over the long term at a much lower value than therapies that patients need to take chronically through IV infusions every week or every month of their lives. And that imbalance needs to be addressed.
Yes.
I know Dr. Bonati loves to talk about CRISPR and other gene editing therapies. Where do you see it going?
Well, CRISPR, gene editing, gene therapy, those are the future of one-time therapies. They are the holy grail of medicine, a one-time administration that can cure a genetic disease for life. And some of them are recently being approved and many more are in development, but many are struggling to attract the investment needed to actually bring them through the very expensive, risky drug development process.
Wow, but imagine the lives saved once that would happen. Thank you so much for being on the program, James Geraghty, author of Inside the Orphan Drug Revolution, The Promise of Patient-Centered Biotechnology. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for watching American Medicine Today. Check us out next Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax. If you have any comments or questions, contact us at the number below. You can tweet at Dr. Bonati using hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We would like to hear from you.